All right, before I move away from this image here, I recalled one interesting note. Years ago, when I was living in Syracuse, it was I think my second year in art school. I had a friend that was self-learning tattoo, and he had done a bunch on himself, on his thighs, and on his own forearms and stuff. So I knew he was a really talented illustrator. So he agreed for I think a six pack or something to give me my first tattoo, and I had always wanted something, if I did do something, be my own design and also across my shoulders. So it has a lot of meanings. It's pretty simple, but the in the center of a sun, in the center of my back and my spine, actually right where I broke my back and neck, oddly, years later, and about 14, 15 years ago now at this point. And it is the Japanese kanji symbol for something that loosely translates to "I, the lonely traveler, will find my way." So that's taken on, and this is before I really left Syracuse for even the first time in my life out of college. So it's really taken on a special meaning because I've sort of lived into that. And it stuck out to me. I was actually looking through a book of cool statements, to be honest, and that really stuck out. And I got that on my back. So this piece here is really going to be about sort of these two encounters that I mentioned. One in Syracuse, probably uh, 14, 15 years ago at this point, and then one about 3 years ago in Vermont. So I just quickly Googled this, and there was an article about the difference between mediums and channels and psychics. And a channel is someone who directly allows the spirit to merge into their aura and with the permission of the channel and stepping out of the way by becoming the receiver, or the listener allows the other spirit to communicate directly to others. And so that's basically what the two women, this was not the woman, this is just sort of an image I thought while I speak could embrace the sort of the great feminine, and just sort of this like deep connection to source. I think that this photo may portray, or at least I think it portrays. So let's start with the first experience. So I had come back from California, and I was actually in the process of getting my things together to go back and live and work out in Sonoma, and for Dharma Publishing and Ratna Ling and Odeon and all that great stuff. And this is before I had learned that the job opportunity was on sort of new under new conditions, with the former manager leaving for a position in Brazil. So I was back and thinking I'm moving back to California for good. So I had two of my wolves with me: the mother, the great grandmother, who was still alive at the time, and one of her children. And this woman, I was walking by a metaphysics sort of bookstore. It was right in a neighborhood in Syracuse that I used to live in and had a lot of friends in, just outside of the university area. And it had sort of art books and tapes and crystals, and often had readings and different people there for different sort of cosmic services. And it was a great place, and it's no longer around. But anyhow, I was walking by. I had no intention on stopping, and this woman comes barging through the door, from inside to out onto the sidewalk where I was, and gets my attention immediately and says, "I need to talk to you." And after some back and forth, and me, being kind of startled and confused and wondering what was going on, and she insisted I bring the dogs inside the bookstore. And so it was open to the public. Maybe there was a handful of people milling about, but right at the front, there was sort of the front area. They had a sitting area with all the books and a waterfall and front desk and such. And so we didn't go into a special room or anything. Just 5 feet into the front door, she stopped me and she said, "I need to talk to you. They need to talk to you." and I didn't know. I kind of knew, what maybe she was, but I didn't know what is this a, a plea to have me pay for a reading, or what? It didn't feel like it was like a con or anything like that. It was just, again, was kind of startling. So um, she proceeds to speak, use the male dog, the child, my other dog's pup, to channel my father, my deceased father, from 2.5 years old, and tells me that we were in an accident, that my father died, that he's been here all along, he watches over me, he's proud of me, he loves me, so on and so forth. And she said, the one thing you need to know is it wasn't your fault. And that was like the teaching point, and it sort of was interesting. I was like, well, okay, what do you mean? I was only 2.5 years old. I don't remember it. At least I don't consciously remember it as an adult. And so she said, he wants you to be clear that it wasn't your fault that the accident happened and he died. So maybe as a child or something, I blocked out some sort of energy around, or thoughts around, being a distraction or being involved somehow as a baby, with the accident happening. But what have you? Maybe I've been carrying it for a while, all my life supposedly, and so that was a kind of, again, one of those moments where it's like, okay, it wasn't my fault. I feel that. Thanks, Dad. So now I'm talking to my dad through my dog. So then she looks at me and says, "Where are you going?" And I thought she meant, like down the street to the park, what have you. And then that we got into, what she really meant in terms of it in life. And I was telling her about California and where I was living and what I was doing. And she said, well, you're meant to be back here. Your work is here. And I said, well, and this is, again, not too long after, less than a year after, think my organization coming to an end, running for mayor and kind of taking off and heading west to, start life anew. And so I was kind of shaking my shoulder, saying, I've tried. I didn't say anything out loud, but she said, I know you've done good work here. I know you've done a lot here. And she said, you've brought a lot of people together. And I said, okay. And, oddly, or maybe not so oddly, the owners of the bookstore actually knew me, knew who I was, and some of the work I had done, not intimately, but at least, I was in the paper enough, and I worked at the restaurant down the street. So there was some corroboration and some chuckling kind of in the space, because they knew, how I had, kind of put myself out there. So she said, you are, whether you're leaving or not, you'll be back here. And then gave me a set of, I don't remember them all, but the ones that stood out, a set of sort of indicators of what my path would be. So she said, you'll live on a cabin on a lake. You'll then surround yourself by women. And then you'll come back and you'll put your suit and tie back on, and you'll do what needs to be done because you know what needs to be done. And unlike the first time where you were trying to be more kumbaya, make sure everybody's voice was heard, everybody's hold hands, so on and so forth, which is, I guess, partially true, if not true. She said this time around, you'll need to just get it done. So it'll be more or less like a benevolent dictator. You'll just have to tell people what to do for the benefit of all, like for the goals to be achieved. You'll just have to make it happen. So I don't know how much time I want to leave left in this video, but the full circle of that is that again, real quickly, I went to California, it didn't work out, and I came back and lived in Ithaca. So in Ithaca, after a year and a half of living in Fall Creek, right near downtown at the base of the hill, Cornell, so on and so forth, I actually moved up to a log cabin in a little hamlet called Ludlowville, right at the base of the river, sort of estuary or whatever that flowed into the lake. So I technically lived in a cabin on the lake for 2.5 years, and it was sort of one of those moments where I was like, "Oh my gee, this is definitely what that woman was talking about." Here I am a year and a half later, living on a lot, or by then it was 3 or so years later after she spoke to me, living in a cabin on a lake. So then what I read to be in retrospect potentially the surround myself by women is that when I was doing the equilibrium work and prior to my partner and I opening the space, and basically the first experience we had when we came back from Belize and landed in Vermont, and we were living in an old RV in the woods with no heat, no running water, no electricity.